Good evening and Happy New Year. You're tuned into our 6 p.m. newscast from the Arirang News Center in Seoul. Great to have you with us. I'm Scott Thompson. We begin with the beginning of 2015. Koreans stayed up late into the night to say hello to the new year, and many didn't rest until they saw the first sunrise. Friends and families flocked to key spots around the nation to make wishes at dawn for a prosperous 2015. They did so despite sub-zero temperatures, which plummeted to as low as -10 degrees in some parts of the country. Here in the capital city, in Seoul Tower, was the popular hotspot to cheer on the rising sun. But the first piece of Korean land to see the sunrise this morning was Korea's easternmost island of Dokdo. And people aren't the only ones happy to see the new year. Sheep will have plenty to celebrate in the coming months, as 2015 is their year on the zodiac calendar. Son Jung-in reports on how some local sheep are getting ready to relish their moment in the sun.
The sheep at this zoo have gone all out, dressed up in cute rainbow-striped clothes. Wearing embroidered hairbands and even pink blush on their cheeks, they're ready to meet the visitors who came to see them to mark the year of the sheep. They move through the fence at the sound of the bell. Some kids get scared and walk backward out of fear, while others can't take their hands off of the plump wool.
The sheep feels very soft and nice. I have clothes made of wool, but it feels a lot different touching it with my own hands.
The animal is recognized as a source of kindness, humility, and respect for parents, as seen from a young sheep that kneels down for their mother's milk.
Sheep are very smart. They can recognize their names and their keeper's voice. I feel proud when they hear me calling them and follow me.
It's hoped that the year of the sheep will be calmer than 2014 and bring peaceful and compassionate time like the spirit the animal symbolizes. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
And the new year is a time of high hopes and good cheer, and people from all over the world gathered with that spirit in mind to ring in the start of 2015. In Brazil, an estimated 2 million people converged on Copacabana Beach for a 16-minute-long fireworks show. They weren't just celebrating the new year, but also the official opening of Rio de Janeiro's 450th birthday. Tens of thousands braved the cold in London for a display of pyrotechnics on the River Thames, with Big Ben chiming in the new year with his unmistakable sound. And in New York's Times Square, arguably the mother of New Year's celebrations, about 1 million people gathered to watch the ball drop, as they've done nearly every year since 1907. And back now to Korea, where President Park Geun-hye spent her first morning of 2015 visiting the Seoul National Cemetery. The visit came in the 70th anniversary of South Korea's liberation from Japanese colonial rule. In a message she left inside a scrapbook at the cemetery, the president called for peace and prosperity on the Korean peninsula in the new year. Earlier, in a message for South Korea's military, President Park called on troops to maintain their readiness. She said that strong security was a prerequisite for possible unification with North Korea. And speaking of North Korea, in his New Year's address, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un raised the possibility of holding high-level talks with South Korea in the coming months. It's the first time the young leader has publicly broached that idea, raising hopes of an improvement in inter-Korean ties. Connie Lee reports.
In his nationally televised New Year's speech, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said he's open to talks with South Korea, even possibly with President Park Geun-hye.
If the atmosphere and environment are there is no reason not to hold a high-level summit. We will make every effort to advance dialogue and cooperation.
As North Koreans ring in the new year, Kim used his address to speak on different issues. It was Kim's third New Year's address since becoming leader, and in it he spent more time than usual talking about bettering inter-Korean ties and calling on Seoul to be serious about it. Kim's statement was welcomed by Seoul. The South Korean government in turn urged North Korea to take steps to normalize relations, such as responding to Seoul's earlier proposal to hold talks this month. Kim, however, also criticized South Korea's military exercises with the U.S., calling them a source of tension. In addition to a possible meeting with South Korea, Kim also spoke about Pyongyang's plans to develop special economic and tourist zones in the new year. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
The hackers who have wreaked havoc on Sony Pictures in recent weeks have reportedly also threatened an American news media organization. That's according to an FBI bulletin dated December 24th that has been obtained by the online publication The Intercept. It says the Guardians of Peace hacker group, which has claimed responsibility for that Sony attack, also warned an unnamed news organization of a possible attack. U.S. authorities have not commented publicly on the threat. The FBI has pinned the blame on North Korea for the hacking attack on Sony, and a diplomatic source familiar with that investigation says they have now linked that attack to North Korea's surveillance authority, who they believe used an IP address in Xinjiang, China. The U.S. is reportedly asking the Chinese government for help in their probe. On to some economic news now. Despite the slowdown in global economic growth, Korea won the Triple Crown in trade last year. The nation topped the $1 trillion mark in trade volume for the fourth consecutive year, to go along with record highs in total exports and trade surplus. Our Kim Min-ji takes a closer look at those numbers.
2014 was another golden year for Korean trade, with new records being set in exports, trade volume, and trade surplus. According to the Trade Ministry, overall exports came to nearly $580 billion, which is up 2.4% from a year ago. Imports rose 2% to about $530 billion. Trade volume reached a record high and topped the $1 trillion mark for the fourth straight year, while the trade surplus also rose to a new record of nearly $50 billion. Exports to the U.S. rose the most at 13.4%, followed by the European Union and ASEAN member nations. But exports to China, Korea's largest trading partner, edged down slightly due to the increased competitiveness of local products. Shipments to Japan also slumped nearly 7% on the back of the weak yen. Meanwhile, the overall rise in exports was driven by semiconductors, with shipments climbing nearly 10% to about $63 billion. Exports of steel products, mobile phones, and shipping also saw steady rises. Shipments of petroleum-related goods, however, fell 3% due to slumping crude prices. As for 2015, the Trade Ministry expects another fruitful year, driven by the positive effects of the country's free trade agreements. Outbound shipments are forecast to jump nearly 4% on year to almost $600 billion. Imports are also expected to gain just over 3% to about $540 billion. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
At midnight, at the very moment the calendar turned over to 2015 here in Korea, a number of changes went into effect. From higher cigarette prices and smoking bans to extra welfare benefits. Our Ji Myung-gil has the rundown.
It isn't going to be a good start to the year for smokers in the nation, as the price of a pack jumps on New Year's Day. The first tobacco price hike in a decade sees prices rise by around $1.80. That brings the average cost of a pack of cigarettes to over $4. And it doesn't stop there either. Smoking is now completely banned in all restaurants nationwide. People caught lighting up in prohibited zones could be slapped with a fine of up to $90. These measures were unveiled by the government in September in an attempt to reduce the country's high smoking rate. There are more changes too. From the start of the new year, families facing severe financial hardships will receive more help from the government as it expands the scope of people who can apply for welfare benefits. This includes a stronger safety net for destitute families. The changes were proposed after a mother and her 2 daughters committed suicide in February because of financial troubles. Korea has also upped efforts to curb greenhouse gas emissions. The government is making local companies follow a trading scheme, which requires businesses to reduce emissions or buy credits if they have difficulty meeting the targets. They'll be subject to emission restrictions from 2015 through 2017. The aggregate emissions quota for more than 500 businesses has been set at nearly 1.6 billion tons over the next 3 years. And from January 1st, tourists will be able to make use of a clearer and more convenient standard to help them select a suitable hotel. The Tourism Ministry has adopted the internationally recognized 5-star rating system. The move comes as Korea aims to better inform the 14 million foreign tourists that visit the country each year. Since 1999, hotel ratings in Korea have been voluntary and self-determined, garnering criticism and consumer complaints for being inconsistent and often inflated. Kim Young-gim, Arirang News.
Poor weather conditions continue to hamper search and recovery efforts for Air Asia Flight 8501 that crashed on Sunday off the coast of Borneo. Indonesian authorities had hoped that divers would be able to investigate what they believe is the fuselage of the jetliner, just about 30 to 50 meters below the surface of the Java Sea. But rough seas have kept them out of the water. A team of 47 Indonesian divers remains on standby waiting for the go-ahead. While in the air, high winds are limiting what search helicopters can do. 7 bodies have so far been recovered from waters in the area, along with debris such as a suitcase, an emergency slide, and a life jacket. And the people of Shanghai rang in the new year with tragedy. At least 36 people who had gone to the Bund waterfront district of the city to celebrate the coming of 2015 were killed in a stampede just before midnight, many of them students, while dozens of others were injured. Witnesses and state media say the accident was likely triggered by people rushing to pick up fake money that had been thrown from a nearby building. Chinese President Xi Jinping ordered the Shanghai government to determine what caused the tragedy as soon as possible and called on others around the country to make sure a similar disaster doesn't happen again. And that's all for now. Happy New Year wherever you may be, and we'll see you right back here at 10 p.m. Korea time with another live newscast. Until then, goodbye.